Well, the Orioles got a win on Monday night, and they also got a new face joining the bullpen. I'll get to it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, September 16th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 4-1 victory over the Chicago White Sox on Monday night. I'll give you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including some big-time bat missing from Kyle Bradish, some terrible umpiring behind home plate, and what a relief performance from Dietrich Enns. Then we'll talk about the flurry of roster moves that the Orioles made on Monday. Chayce McDermott is back, but he's now officially in the bullpen as a reliever. Talk about what that means for his future with the Orioles. And unfortunately, Albert Suárez has hit the injured list. It's going to end his season. Does it end his Orioles career? We'll talk about all that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. So let's start with an Orioles win, which was certainly nice to see after they were swept in Toronto by the Blue Jays this weekend. A little bit better baseball played by the Orioles on Monday night. Now, did it help that they are playing this current version of the Chicago White Sox with their loss fell to 57-94 on the season? Absolutely, it did help, but it's still nice to see the Orioles pull out a win. The O's with a 4-1 victory over the White Sox on the south side of Chicago in game 1 of a 3-game set this week. Orioles get to 70-80 on the season, keeping the winning record potential alive. Just need to win now the final 12 games of the year to finish over 500. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from this Orioles victory over the White Sox. And the first thing you need to know is Kyle Bradish went out there and missed a ton of bats for the Orioles. 4th start for Bradish coming off of Tommy John surgery, and he got 17 whiffs on 39 swings. That is pretty ridiculous. That is a 44% whiff rate in an entire start for Kyle Bradish against this White Sox lineup. They had no idea what was coming at him. His final line was 5 innings of 1-run ball on 4 hits. He struck out 9. He did walk 4 without allowing a home run on 88 pitches. Bradish with a 2.45 ERA now in his first 4 starts back from Tommy John. And it wasn't just that he was missing bats. Even when the White Sox made contact, none of it was very impactful. Just 3 hard hit balls in those 5 innings by Chicago hitters on Monday night. And for Bradish, it was once again for the 2nd straight start after he didn't really do it the first couple times out there. We saw him mix his pitches, which led to so much success back in 2023, where the slider is his most used pitch. And we saw that again on Monday night. The slider got a ton of swing and miss. He commanded it really well. That pitch was just cooking. Now, overall, some of his fastball command was a little erratic in this one. He did walk 4 batters. That's the first time since actually in Chicago in May of last year that Bradish walked 4 in a single start. Couple of 4-pitch walks from Kyle Bradish in this one. You don't love to see that, but overall, I mean, you get 9 strikeouts in 5 innings. You miss that many bats. I know it's not a very good Chicago White Sox order. I totally get that. That is a caveat to this start. But to have Bradish pitching this well down the stretch, coming off Tommy John, means he can knock whatever rust off that was there, have a regular offseason, and hopefully be that Orioles ace in 2026. And the stuff is just, it's so clearly back, which is really the best sign here for Kyle Bradish. And even though there was a little bit of a blip in command, it hasn't really been an issue in the first couple of starts. So maybe you monitor it, not too concerned about it. And the reason why I'm not super concerned is the second thing you need to know from this win is that maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times a year when I'm recapping a game, I have one of the 5 things be about the umpire. It either has to be an egregious call that changed the game or a terrible strike zone. And Monday, it was a terrible strike zone, because the second thing you need to know is Chad Whitson, who was the home plate umpire on Monday night, had one of the smallest and one of the worst strike zones I've seen maybe this season, maybe of all time, Whitson on the Umpire Scorecards website does grade out as one of the worst pitch calling umpires in Major League Baseball this year. And like spiritually, I'm counting the 1 run Kyle Bradish allowed in the bottom of the first inning. I'm counting that as unearned because Kyle Bradish started this game with what should have been a strikeout of the White Sox leadoff hitter, Mike Tauchman. 3-2 pitch, dots a fastball, perfectly down and in, catches a whole bunch in the zone for a called strike 3. I don't know how anyone could call that a ball, and yet Whitman did. If you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, you can see here throwing up the pitch plot from Bradish versus Tauchman on Monday night's game from Baseball Savant and StatCast. You can see that 7th pitch, that 3-2 fastball, got a whole lot of the strike zone down and in. Even that sinker up and away probably should have been called a strike. That was also called a ball in this at bat. It ends up being a walk for Tauchman. Bradish strikes out the next 2 hitters, so it should have been 1-2-3 with 3 strikeouts. And then he allows a couple of 2-out singles for the only White Sox run to score, which shouldn't have even happened. This doesn't happen if we have the ABS challenge system, which could be coming into Major League Baseball pretty soon. But it wasn't just that pitch. Like you watched throughout this game, there are plenty of pitches that Whitson, the home plate umpire, just missed on the corners. Then his zone got weirdly big later in the game. Then it got small again. That was probably the worst zone I have seen all year. And I want to take some bias out of it because it's not like I'm disgruntled because the Orioles lost the game. Like the O's won this game and they were kind of in control for most of it, winning 4-1. And I still think from the Orioles side of things, this was the worst strike zone I have seen all season. And I feel kind of crazy pointing it out in a game between the White Sox and the Orioles, both out of it in mid-September. And this is one of my 5 things. That's how bad I thought it was from Whitson on Monday night. Third thing you need to know from this win is that Colton Cowser had the winning swing in this one, homering for the 2nd straight day. He went oppo for a solo home run in the 7th inning in Toronto on Sunday, and then backs it up with a much bigger home run on Monday. 3-run shot off left-handed reliever Tyler Alexander in the 6th inning, broke up a 1-1 tie and gave the Orioles a 4-1 lead. Got behind 0-2, fouled off a couple of pitches, got a 1-2 sinker on the outside part of the plate, and just smoked it the other way. Another opposite field home run into the bleachers for a 3-run shot. Just the 4th home run of the year off a left-handed pitcher for Cowser, and he struggled mightily, in general, but especially against lefties this year. Came into this game hitting just 165 with a 51 WRC plus against left-handed pitching on the season. So maybe that swing, the back-to-back days with homers, can put him on a little bit of a run here late in September, and we hope he can finish a season strong that hasn't really gone his way with injuries and performance for Colton. Fourth thing you need to know from this Orioles series opening win is that Jackson Holliday reached base 3 more times in this game. A single, a double, and a walk in a 2-for-4 night for Jackson Holliday out of the leadoff spot. Hitting .373 now since August 28th. He's got 14 walks versus 10 strikeouts in that stretch. He's getting on base like a madman. He's been essentially a top 10 hitter in Major League Baseball during that stretch. I'm basically talking about Jackson's performance in every single episode over the past 2+ weeks because he's just been so good. What a way it would be if he can finish strong in these final 2 weeks of the season to end his first full big league season with a really, really strong September. That would do wonders for him going into the offseason. It kind of seems to be all coming together with Jackson right now, not just the hitting for average, hitting for a little power, but also that extreme batter's eye, walking more than he's striking out, which we saw throughout the minors as he climbed up the system. There had been an issue. He wasn't walking a lot for a while. Now he's doing it. We're kind of seeing the full Jackson on display. And you've got to remember, he is still only 21 years old. There is so much development and just so much baseball ahead of this guy. The fact that he's putting it all together still at age 21 bodes a lot of good things for him and for the Orioles. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 4-1 win over the Chicago White Sox on Monday night is that the Orioles bullpen, after a really, really tough weekend in Toronto, they were marvelous on Monday night. Now, I say the Orioles bullpen, it was a Cade Stroud 1-2-3 6th inning. And then after that, it was just Dietrich Enns, who goes out there and throws 3 perfect innings with 4 strikeouts to pick up the save on just 32 pitches. He was just pounding high fastballs up to 96 velocity-wise, and the White Sox had no chance. 7 whiffs on 12 swings against Enns' 4-seam fastball on Monday night. It was a wild outing to watch from Dietrich Enns, who's frankly been awesome since the Orioles picked him up from the Tigers as kind of a tiny little cash trade at the deadline. He's been a huge addition. That was his second save with the O's. He's pitched in so many different roles. And again, to get the 9-out save is one thing, but to do it when it's a save situation, it's a 3-run game the whole time, and do it perfectly with 4 strikeouts, that is wild. Enns became just the 9th time an Orioles pitcher in franchise history has ever gotten a save of 3 innings or more while going perfect, not allowing a base runner, and striking out at least 4 batters. So basically only 8 other Orioles since 1954 had done what Enns just did. The last one was, here's an absolute remember some guys that I didn't even remember. The last Oriole to do it was Kerry Leitenberg back in 2003. Enns is the first Oriole in 22 years to do what he did on Monday night. That was a special relief outing. And the Orioles bullpen was perfect because he was 9 up, 9 down, Stroud, was 3 up, 3 down. And the O's also, it was the strikeouts. They had their best strikeout game since the trade deadline. The Orioles dealt away Brian Baker, Gregory Soto, Seranthony Dominguez, and Andrew Kittredge, plus Charlie Morton. Those guys struck out a lot of batters before the trade deadline. And then, of course, you have Felix Bautista out for the season. He strikes out a lot of guys as well. But the Orioles pitching staff as a whole, they struck out 15 White Sox on Monday night. That was their most in a 9-inning game for the Orioles since the trade deadline. The last time they struck out at least 15 was June 13th in a 2-0 win over the Angels when Charlie Morton struck out 10. I was actually at that game. And it's just the 5th time this year that Orioles pitching has struck out at least 15 batters. 16 is the season high for the Orioles. A lot of good swing and miss stuff. Bradish, Stroud, Enns combined to get those 27 outs, a lot of them via the strikeout. And the Orioles win the opener 4-1 over the White Sox. But that wasn't the only Orioles piece of news from Monday. We had a lot of roster moves, and the biggest one probably being Chayce McDermott, who at one point earlier this year was the Orioles' #1 pitching prospect, has rejoined the big league club. I'll talk about what his role will be now and what it will be moving forward. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Nutrafol. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, yeah, sure, like that one actually works. Well, there are so many products out there, it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. That's why you should give Nutrafol a closer look. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. And it's not just hype. This is a supplement clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding with a proactive approach. And I think the best part about Nutrafol is it's simple to add to your day. 4 pills with a meal, no prescription needed. It's that easy. So see thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On MLB listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. There is nothing like catching a baseball game live. The energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person, but actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees. Sometimes that can really just take all the fun out of buying those tickets. That's why I use Game Time, the apps that gives you the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Again, those fees are included. You know your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. So for the Orioles, they get the win over the White Sox 4-1 on Monday night. They did it without using Chayce McDermott, but they certainly could have because he is back in the Oriole bullpen. The O's making a flurry of roster moves, which we'll get to in the final segment of today's show. But I think the most important move they made was that Chayce McDermott, the 27-year-old right-handed pitcher, was recalled from AAA Norfolk and will join the Orioles bullpen. Now, who is Chayce McDermott? If you're not familiar, came over at the deadline in the Trey Mancini trade from the Astros back in 2022. McDermott kind of fought his way up through the Orioles system and dealt with some injuries and some up and down performance as well. Missed the end of 2023 with an injury, missed the end part of last year with a shoulder issue, had a lat strain in spring training this year, which made his season start a month late. And there's been some issues with performance as well. He's now 27 years old. He's had some command issues. He was kind of up and down as a starter. He made his major league debut with one start in Miami last year. Then he made kind of two starts earlier this season for the Orioles when the O's were just constantly running out of starting pitching due to injury. None of those three starts went particularly well for McDermott at the big league level. So eventually he had another kind of small injury in the middle of this season. He missed about a week. It wasn't anything super serious, but he came back from that arm injury in AAA in mid-July, and the Orioles moved him into the bullpen because as a starter in AAA this year, 43 innings, he had a 6.91 ERA with a 22% strikeout rate to an 18% walk rate. That's just not going well. He was throwing a four-seam fastball at 94 and then kind of mixing in slider, changeup, curveball, sweeper, cutter, just trying to figure out what works. Well, he came back in mid-July. He made one relief outing that was terrible, gave up 5 runs in less than 2 innings. After that, he settled in the bullpen. And since then, in 15 1/3 innings in relief in AAA Norfolk, McDermott has a 1.76 ERA. It's 13 hits, 3 earned runs, 18 strikeouts to 7 walks, and a hit batter in that time. His four-seam fastball is up more than 2 miles an hour, up to 96, 97. He's got a cutter at 89, which is now his number 2 pitch. It's got a 46% swing and miss rate. That is absurd. He still throws in, the changeup and the sweeper, but he's really cut down the usage on those other pitches and really focused on fastball cutter. And it's allowed him to dominate and get both righties and lefties out. And truly, this is going to be McDermott's role moving forward. This is a guy who, when he came over, he had big strikeout numbers in the Astros system. He continued that in the Orioles system. He had some amazing years in the minor leagues in Baltimore as well. Even when he came over, you look back at 2023, he makes 16 starts in AA, has a 3.56 ERA, gets moved up to AAA at the end of that year, and has a 2.49 ERA in 10 starts. And you're thinking at the end of 2023, you're like, Chayce McDermott's going to be in the 2024 Orioles rotation, and he's going to be dominant. And then in 24, he was still good, right? 22 starts at a 3.78 ERA. Wasn't as good, but was still solid. But then he had all the injuries and kind of just didn't fully recover from there. The command got worse. He turned 27 a couple of weeks ago, and you're just like, at this point, yeah, he's still a prospect, but he was, even at the beginning of this year, I think most places had him as the number 1 pitching prospect in the Orioles system. And as this 2025 season went on, he just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped on people's prospect rankings, where he was outside the top 15, 20, or even 30 at some places in the Orioles system, because this year as a starter had been such a disaster. But the move to the bullpen, which is something I'd kind of been calling for since early this season, helped immensely. And I think this is his role moving forward. He's already 27. I don't see him going back to the rotation. I've been saying this for a couple of months now. I really do think McDermott is the right-handed version of DL Hall. It's a very similar spot where, both of these guys were essentially the number 1 pitching prospect in the system at one point. They've got great stuff. They put up great strikeout numbers. They were great all the way up to and in AAA as a starter. Then some injuries came around. They kind of hit a wall, and it became very clear they needed to be a reliever. And remember, when the Orioles converted DL Hall officially to a reliever in 2023, he was one of their most trusted bullpen arms down the stretch as they were in that division race. And he was, pitching in the postseason for the Orioles because he was throwing the ball so well out of the bullpen. And then, of course, they trade him to the Brewers in the Corbin Burns deal, and he's been solid, but still injured as a Brewers reliever. And the Brewers also were kind of trying to still use him as a starter, which I don't get. But I think we see the same path for McDermott. Not saying they're going to trade him for a top-line starting pitcher. Maybe they will this offseason. That's in the cards. But I think if he stays in Baltimore, he's going to be a good reliever similar to what DL Hall is. That is what I think with Chayce McDermott. He will have options next year as well. So he's still going to be an optionable arm. So that doesn't guarantee him a spot in the opening day bullpen. There's a situation where we get to opening day next year, and it's down to Chayce McDermott and Rico Garcia for the final bullpen spot. And the Orioles give it to Rico Garcia because he is out of options. You'd have to DFA him, whereas McDermott can be freely sent to AAA. But even if that's the case, McDermott's going to be an important part of the 2026 Orioles bullpen. And these final 2 weeks, I think, are going to be a good chance to get a look at him. Now, we're not going to see him, have 8 or 9 outings down the stretch, but we should see McDermott pitch, 5 or 6 times at least, I would think, in these final 2 weeks, and probably only 1 inning stints. Maybe he'll have a multi-inning outing. He did that a little bit in AAA, of course, was a starter earlier this year. But there's going to be maybe some growing pains, but I think this is going to be a really good role for McDermott. I think he's going to stick in the bullpen eventually next year, and I think long-term, even beyond 2026, this is a good shutdown, potentially late inning reliever for the Orioles. It's not everything they thought he would be when they traded for him from the Astros. It's not the starter they thought they would get, but if they can still get a good reliever out of McDermott, that is still a good outcome for a pitching prospect like this, who has had a lot of risk to go along with him in his career with the Orioles. But of course, McDermott coming up, that means you got to make at least one roster move, and the Orioles made actually a flurry of roster moves on Monday. So we'll get to all the rest of those moves and some positive Orioles injury news coming up to finish off the show. That is next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And FanDuel is great because it fits however you want to bet. Player props, same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds, especially on a football Sunday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So with Chayce McDermott being recalled on Monday and joining the Orioles bullpen, that means, of course, there had to be some other roster moves, at least one other roster move, but the Orioles did end up making multiple roster moves and wanted to get to those here to finish off this episode. Let's start with, on the pitching side, the move that was made for McDermott initially. That was Carson Ragsdale was optioned to AAA Norfolk after Sunday's game. Now, Ragsdale, who came over from the Giants on waivers, was called up Sunday to kind of be a bulk pitcher in the bullpen game. He gives the Orioles 3 innings, but kind of had to wear it, right? He allows 8 earned runs in what was his major league debut, making that with the Orioles in Toronto on Sunday. You're in a bullpen game. You're out of it. You got a guy who's fresh. You just kind of got to wear it. He threw 80 pitches, gave up 8 runs in 3 innings. It wasn't great, but he was optioned down to AAA. But then the Orioles, after optioning him, decided, actually, we are going to DFA him. So Ragsdale was DFA'd. He is now on waivers. Orioles hoping that he does clear waivers because he would have to accept his assignment back to AAA Norfolk. They're hoping, I'm sure, they can keep him in the organization because there are some things that they do certainly see with Ragsdale. But the reason why they put Ragsdale on waivers after just optioning him initially is that the Orioles claimed another interesting bullpen arm. Left-handed pitcher Jose Castillo was claimed off waivers from the Seattle Mariners by the Orioles on Monday. 29-year-old lefty who's pitched for 3 teams this year and is out of options. Now, he is not reported to the team yet, so he hasn't been added to the active roster, but he is on the 40-man roster, and because he's out of options, he will be added to the active roster. So whether that is Tuesday or Wednesday when he reports to Chicago, there's going to be a roster move involving him. More on Castillo coming up on tomorrow's episode. We'll get a full breakdown on him. So he's not on the active roster yet, but you had to clear 40-man spot for him, which was Carson Ragsdale. But then there was still another roster move, and that is because Albert Suárez was placed on the 15-day injured list on Monday with right elbow discomfort. Suárez said his forearm tightened up during his start on Sunday. He was kind of the starter for the bullpen game. He had pitched 3 innings, had thrown the ball pretty well through 53 pitches. He'd allowed just 1 earned run, but he felt something. He told the trainers, he talked with the Orioles. They took him out of the game after 3 innings. He's going to get some imaging done on that forearm and that elbow. But we know his 2025 season is done just because it's the 15-day IL and there are less than 15 days left in the season. The bigger question for Suárez is what this looks like for the future. It was already in question for Suárez and the Orioles, right? He's a guy who had a major shoulder injury this year, missed 5 months, has diminished stuff, and is about to turn 36. And he's out of options. That's not a great formula for staying with the Orioles long-term. Now you add in that it's not just the shoulder, but there's also some, we don't know the severity. Mancelino wasn't going to speculate, but there's some sort of elbow issue going on. We'll probably know more later this week. there's a serious chance Albert Suárez has thrown his last pitch for the Orioles and potentially his last pitch in the major leagues. That's just the reality of having this many injuries when you're about to turn 36 as a pitcher who doesn't really have a huge track record of success anyway, especially in Major League Baseball. So I hope the best for him, and hopefully it's something minor and he can come back next year, but we'll certainly monitor that. But it was an amazing 1 year the Orioles essentially got out of Suárez in 2024. If that's all they get, it would still be an amazing contribution. Just kind of sad to see after that amazing year, this year just be riddled with injuries for him. And it could again be the way that his season and his Orioles career does come to an end. But with Suárez going on the IL, that did open up another spot in the bullpen, and the Orioles filled it with Yarmil Geraldo, who was recalled from AAA on Monday. Geraldo, who pitched for the Orioles earlier this season after they brought him in on a minor league deal, 14 and a third innings, 5.65 ERA in the majors, 12 Ks to 6 walks, and 4 home runs in his first big league stint. He was then optioned back down to AAA back on August 27th. But since he's gone down to AAA, 7 scoreless innings for the Norfolk Tigers, just 2 hits to 12 strikeouts and 4 walks. He's been basically untouchable in AAA Norfolk. His fastball's got that crazy ride on it. His changeup is ridiculous. Throws a pretty solid slider to go with it. He's got some really nasty stuff. He's got to kind of get his home run problem under control, a little bit of a command issue, but he's a really interesting arm who's also going to have options next year. I think the Orioles are going to do everything they can to hold on to Geraldo throughout this offseason for him to be kind of a depth reliever who probably starts the year next year in AAA Norfolk, but they can call on when they want to. Now, there's a chance he doesn't pitch again this year for the Orioles because he's probably going to be the guy who gets optioned right back to AAA Norfolk when Jose Castillo actually reports to the team and is added to the active roster. But hopefully for Geraldo's sake, that doesn't happen until Wednesday, and he can at least get into a major league game on Tuesday night before going back down to Norfolk. And then a couple of pieces of positive injury news. Adley Rutschman, who's been out for a while now with another oblique issue, he is going to start his rehab assignment tonight with AAA Norfolk. Tony Mansolino expects it to take about a week. So we should see, hopefully, Adley back next week. And unfortunately, that leaves him, only 6 games remaining in his big league season, but 6 games better than nothing to finish out his season on the active roster. And even better news for Jordan Westburg, who the Orioles are expecting to activate off the injured list today. He has a locker. He is with the team in Chicago, was in the dugout. He's expected to come off the injured list. He's missed a good chunk of time with that ankle injury. Tony Mansolino said the plan is for Westburg to DH on Wednesday and then play DH on Tuesday and then play third base on Wednesday and Thursday and get himself back in the groove. Don't expect Westburg to play in every single one of the Orioles' remaining 12 games this season. They're not going to want him to re-injure anything. I guess he plays in 7 or 8 of the games just to keep him fresh, but still finish his season on the roster. The move is either going to be optioning Luis Vasquez to AAA or DFAing Emmanuel Rivera to make room for Westburg. I would think one is done now, and the other one is probably done whenever Adley Rutschman returns to the Orioles next week. That's what I think is most likely for the O's to do with those roster moves, but happy to see Jordan Westburg getting back in the lineup today. Jordan Westburg will be able to face the Chicago White Sox as the Orioles go for the series victory tonight at 7:40 on MASN 2. Westburg and his friends will face Shane Smith, who's been one of the best Rule 5 pick stories of the season. A 3.78 ERA for the White Sox in 26 starts was their all-star selection, I believe. And he will go up against, here's some good news, Dean Kramer, who had his last start skipped because he left in his previous start after 3 innings with some forearm soreness. Luckily, the MRI was clean on Kramer. He was scheduled to pitch over the weekend against the Blue Jays. That was pushed back, but Dean is scheduled to take the ball tonight and get at least a couple more starts in. Luckily, hopefully, we avoided an injury scare there with Kramer. What another way it would have been to tack on to this injury-filled season for the Orioles, but it seems like Dean's okay. Hopefully, he gets through tonight's start healthy and can finish this season healthy and get himself ready for 2026. That'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the show, follow the show, leave a 5-star rating and a review. I haven't got a lot of reviews lately on Apple Podcasts. You could throw me some reviews on there, your thoughts on the show. That would be super helpful. Of course, also make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. And if you have Orioles thoughts, you have questions, mailbag questions, you just want to talk some ball, you want to give some feedback on the show, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. I'll be back tomorrow recapping game 2 between the Orioles and the White Sox. We'll talk about Jose Castillo, the Orioles' new waiver claim, and give you some of those injury updates with Jordan Westburg coming back. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.